Well, for the past few weeks, China has dominated national headlines, and it hasn't been in a positive light. Allegations of attempted political infiltration by Chinese officials, as well as their continued purchasing of Australian-owned assets, has only heightened debate about the relationship. Kevin Rudd, who's, let's not forget, 2 months ago was out lashing Liberal Party members such as Andrew Hastie over causing, quote, hysteria over China, well, he entered back into the political debate this week because he made some incredible claims about how Australia can and should fend for itself. Rudd believes that the nation needs to double in population to 50 million so that it can independently defend itself against the Chinese threat. Now, that's 50 million people he wants in Australia, mind you, up against China's 1.5 billion. I don't know what you think there, Kevin. But what do you think? Forget what Kevin Rudd said. What do you think? It's Friday, so that means this is the question we put to you when our Sky News reporters took to the street, and the specifics of their question was this. Do you agree with Kevin Rudd's population targets? What approach should the Australian government take when it comes to population policy? Joining me now for Friday Feedback is Sky News Northern Australia correspondent Matt Cunningham in Darwin. Matt, I bet you more people will be popular up in the north, but not so much down south.
Well, that's right, Peter, because, I mean, for a start, there are so many issues down south with infrastructure. I mean, the big cities that we have at the moment, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane in particular, can't even keep up with the population levels they have at the moment. Ask anyone who's tried to drive around in a car in inner city Melbourne or Sydney, in the past couple of years, what that's like, and they'll tell you that really, that if we've got a population problem in this country at the moment, it's probably that at the moment we've got too many people in our big cities. But certainly that was a feeling that came through when we hit the streets and asked people what they thought. We asked them what they thought about Kevin Rudd's comments and also about what they thought Australia should be doing as far as population policy.
I don't agree with him because there's more to consider than just our defence. There's a society of Australia to consider as well. And doubling the population will not, well, doubling it quickly will not help that.
My opinion would be not to double our population, just be a little bit smarter how we do business, and just our economy just to be running a little bit better than it is.
I think 50 million sounds like a lot of people on the driest continent in the world. Too many people, yeah, I reckon. Says me who comes from somewhere else too.
We've got to all live within our means. And at the moment we're not living within our means, so we have to stem population growth so we can start, getting our own house in order in the first place, and then we can relook at population growth at a later date. At the moment, get our own house in order, and then start looking at population growth in another 3 or 4 years to see whether it's the way forward, that's all.
We don't want to push it. We don't have the infrastructure for what we've got now.
It's not a good idea. We're already seeing buses, trains and trams full. Like I came here in 2015, never saw so many people. It's not bad, but if you do that, it's not a good idea.
The last person we should be taking advice from is Kevin Rudd. But if Kevin had some wisdom in there, he'd realise that he was in government for quite a while. He had the chance to do something about our population. He didn't. Kevin Rudd should go back in his box, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's one person in that Vox Pop package there, Matt, that agreed with Kevin Rudd, and it's sort of fascinating. There was a woman that made the point about a dry continent. Others talked about sustainability and resources. And in the last period of time in which Australia's population has doubled to get to where we are now at 25 million, we've only increased water storages by 3%. By 3%. Now, we have a dam phobia in this country, so any idea that we're suddenly going to go from 25 to 50, and let's say we double dam storages, they go from 3% growth to a 6% growth, we're in more trouble than Ned Kelly.
Well, that's true. Now, I think if you ask people up here, they might have a slightly different view because, one, we've got plenty of water up here in the top end of this country, although there's certainly plenty of arguments being made that we need to build more dams. And also, we probably have the ability to handle more population up here in this part of the country as well. The problem at the moment, certainly, Peter, is that there are just no jobs up here. And if there are no jobs, you're not going to attract any people. So I think that's the other issue at play here. But I thought there were some of those remarks from Kevin Rudd were quite bizarre. I mean, it was another case of Kevin Rudd really trying to insert himself back into the political discussion in this country and trying to rewrite history in some ways. You had a crack at Tony Abbott, accusing him of trying to ingratiate himself with Chinese leaders. I'm not sure where that came from. He had a crack at Malcolm Turnbull over the deal to lease the Port of Darwin, which I think he was inaccurate there in some of the claims that he made. Of course, that deal was made by the NT government here and signed off by the Foreign Investment Review Board. So, I think, it was another one of those cases where Kevin Rudd trying to say something a bit controversial because he's probably suffering from a bit of relevance deprivation syndrome. But I think the idea that we would try to double the population in this country at the moment is completely unfeasible, particularly when you see the amount of pressure that our big cities are under when it comes to infrastructure, be it transport infrastructure or water infrastructure. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah, I might just put up there for people to have a listen to themselves what Rudd actually said, because we're not paraphrasing him. He could be more pointed, and I make the point again, even if we went to 50 million people, China is 1.5 billion. Now, Kevin speaks a bit of Mandarin. I know he knows the country inside out. He should realise that 50 million isn't much of a chop against 1.5 billion if his argument, as it was, rests on national security grounds. But let's just have a listen to exactly what he said.
But it also means a big and bold approach to continued immigration. Only a country, in my judgment, with a population of 50 million later this century would begin to have the capacity to fund independently the defence and intelligence assets necessary to defend our territorial integrity and maintain our political sovereignty for the long term. This is not politically correct. I know that. I've been attacked for this position before.
I'm almost mentally scarred there watching that vision again, Matt, I have to tell you, because, all of the Ruddisms where he has the hand coming over and the hand coming out, we used to have names for them all in the office. There were particular Rudd moves, and depending how frenetic they were, would tell the temperament of the bloke that day on any given time we watched him on screen. But what did you make? I mean, I'm interested. He was out there, Malcolm Turnbull was out there doing a big launch on the Republic, I think trying to capitalise at least on Prince Andrew's difficulties and others. It seems the only one really who's keeping stum is Julia Gillard. We don't hear much from her. She tends to be overseas doing a lot in relation to women's education. And Abbott's out and about, but he's predominantly firefighting.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the way that our former Prime Ministers are conducting themselves, isn't it? I mean, I think that in the case of both Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull, I think they're probably Prime Ministers who feel like they didn't really achieve what they wanted to achieve when they were in the job, and now they're sort of trying to sort of remind people that, their failures weren't necessarily their fault. I think there was an interesting comment made by one of the people we spoke to when, she said, Kevin Rudd had his chance when he was Prime Minister. Really, if he wanted to do something about this, he should have done something about it then. Well, perhaps that's good advice. Perhaps instead of flying on a plane up here to Darwin during the election campaign and coming up with a policy, while he was sitting there in business class, that he was going to announce some sort of special tax zone for Northern Australia. Perhaps he should have put a bit more effort into the policy to try and ensure that we could have some sort of policies to perhaps populate the north a little bit better, rather than just sort of throwing out a thought bubble after he's left office to sort of try and recreate history.
Yeah, look, it'd be very interesting. We pay for a office for Kevin Rudd and 3 staff in his capacity as a former Prime Minister. He basically doesn't live in Australia anymore. Most of the time he's offshore, the vast majority of it in the United States. So it seems a bit rich to sort of fly in and give us the benefit of his wisdom, tell us all the things he thinks we're doing wrong, and then disappear again. Anyway, we'll leave it there. I could go on about Kevin Rudd all night. Matt Cunningham, I hope you're doing something great for the weekend. I'm assuming you're in the build-up up there now. It'd be starting to get pretty steamy, wouldn't it?
Just looking at some clouds starting to come over. We've had a couple of sprinkles this build-up, but we're waiting for the monsoon to arrive and give us a bit of relief from this stifling heat, Peter. It can't arrive quick enough.
Oh, well, there's plenty of cold beer up your way. I've been there before in that sort of weather, so enjoy your weekend and look forward to catching up with you again next week.